Welcome back to Doug's Art Studio. I think this is lesson number 5, number 4. Last time we did printmaking. This time we're going to do a little exercise in watercolor, and I think it's a beautiful, simple, fresh discipline that might seem scary to some people, but it's really kind of basic. And I'm just going to do a couple of simple things. It's going to be very brief, and I hope you're going to find it exciting. This I found, I was inspired by a watercolor by Georgia O'Keeffe. She had done this study of red leaves, red flowers, and I did them 2 different ways here, and I'm going to demonstrate for you the 2 basic watercolor techniques. One is wet on dry, and the other is a wet on wet technique. In this one, I particularly used a lot of wet on dry, with some areas wet on wet. In this, I kept the colors muted. They're much softer, and sometimes people like that better. They don't like the more intense, brighter color. They like the softer color. And I just wanted you to see the difference, how one can lead to another. This is what artists generally do. They do series. So it isn't like they do one and then they put it aside and then they move on to something totally different. They begin to explore it in many different ways. So I just wanted you to see this. And the way I did this was, when I had it at this point, I went over to the sink and I ran water over it. Believe it or not, I use water a lot, and it winds up creating some very beautiful, rapid effects. And a lot of what we do today, this being watercolor, we're going to be using water as part of our method for painting. Okay, so what I have here is a little card. I want you to take a look at this. Okay, so before we set up our vase and flower, you should know something, just a little basic about shapes. These are the 5 geometric shapes. You have your circle, your cylinder, your cone, your square, your cone, your cylinder, and your triangle. Okay, so if you don't know about those are your 5 basic shapes, and those are the shapes. If you can draw those, you can draw anything in the world. From a hand to a horse, to a fire hydrant, a coffee cup, a table, etc. In this row down here, I just took the circle, I repeated it twice, and I did these circles freehand, by the way. I like practicing circular shapes. I find it very centering and relaxing to do. We're going to do a demonstration for you of a wet on dry technique and a wet on wet technique. Okay, so I'll show you what we have. Okay, so this is the watercolor set I'm using. It's called Grumbacher's watercolors, and I like them a lot. Generally, people either get that or they get this one here. This is the Jack Richardson watercolor set, 22 colors. I like the Grumbacher color cakes. There's 2 rows of them. You'll see in a minute. How about that? And the assortment of colors, I think, are terrific. I keep 2 water wells. One tray has a lot of water in it. That's when I'm generally working and I get color in my brush. I do something and then I just want to clean it off. And this is the final water, so I make sure I don't have any more color left in the brush. So it winds up keeping, it's a purification type thing that I find helpful for me. Okay? So let's do the wet on dry. So what does wet on dry mean? It means that your brush is wet. I had it in the water, and I'm going to get a color. Let's say I get the red. Okay? And I generally have a little pad here. I test it first. And I'm going to go and put that color on dry paper. Wet, brush, dry paper. So this is all I do, and the benefit of this is that I have total control. Take a look at that. The color goes exactly where I want it to go and stays there. How beautiful is that? Take a look. I mean, just a simple circle. There are artists whose entire careers are based on exploring simple geometric shapes like a square, a circle. And if you look at other cultures in history, these shapes have spiritual significance and they've become symbols. That's really beautiful. Look at the difference. Look at the way that's changed from a blank piece of paper, as you see on the right. Okay, so that was wet on dry. Wet brush on dry paper. I have total control. The color doesn't go anywhere I do not want it to go. Okay, so now wet on wet is totally different. And this is very interesting too. You wet the paper first, and I could leave it soaking like that, or I could blot it a little. And I'm going to get my color, and now watch what the color does. I have no control, but sometimes that's really nice because it allows for organic images to evolve and move, and just like nature, you know, nothing's ever the same twice. So I could do that. I could put some here, and you'll see how the water, I could put a little more, and I can get other colors. Now I had that, I could get blue, and you can begin to see what happens. And this is a wet on wet technique where the water becomes an agent in mixing and creating new hues, and you let it happen. Now, if there's something about it you don't like, it's very simple. Just get yourself a paper towel and you just dry it, and you can blot it. You'll never get the stain out of the paper. This is the beauty of watercolor. The beauty of watercolor, even in this first one, is that the color looks like it's breathing. So the lightness of the paper is coming through the hue. So you don't want the color to be heavy with pigment. You don't want it to be opaque. You want it to look like it's a vapor. You want it to look like it's breathing. Okay, and so I could blot that, and I could wet it again and do another wet on wet and use a different color. Okay. So now I'm using yellow, and I'm going to let the yellow saturate wherever the water is. The yellow pigment will begin to find its way. If you were to look at this on a microscopic level on the paper, it's almost like the weave of the paper becomes like tributaries for the color to just move out. Okay? So that's just wet on dry, wet on wet. Very, very simple. In watercolor work, both are used in the same drawing or painting. Okay? So step number three I wanted you to think about was we're going to be creating this picture. I don't know, can you see that? Going to be creating this picture. It's very simple. Okay, we have a cylinder for a vase, and we've got these very similar shapes. The only thing different about them is their scale, the size. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to draw those shapes. All right, so let's do that first. Then I'll go into the next thing. Okay, so all you do is you take your circular shape, make a circle, and then just put a point on one end. It's as simple as that. Now, you can make the large one, make a middle, medium size, make a small one. But this is art. Art is like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It wasn't that he had millions of all different chords and everything. It basically was 4 sounds. Da 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 da. This is the Fifth Symphony. Da 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 da. And he does that for 20 minutes at different speeds and different levels of pitch, but it's all the same notes. And this is what we're doing here. Okay? These are the small ones. Da 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 da. It's almost like you could say this is a musical composition. And I like this. Okay, so try doing this out, and then take your cylinder and practice making that. The cylinder is a square whose top and bottom are curved. That's all, into elliptical shapes. That's it. Okay, so where we'll be next is we'll be getting our piece of paper, and I'm using watercolor paper. It's premium. Okay, it's what you should use. Get a watercolor pad, and I'm just going to very lightly. If you can see my pencil line, I'm working very light because the watercolor is going to be a vapor, And you'll see some of the line through the color, and that's okay. Many of the great masterpiece watercolors, you see the line. And this is the cylinder. And then I'm going to be doing these shapes. But in this particular design, what I wanted to introduce you to was the arabesque as a design element. The arabesque is an S shape, and it creates a rhythm. And it's been used throughout art history, throughout centuries. In the modern century, Matisse used it exclusively. So if you don't understand why you're liking the rhythm of the painting, it's because he used the arabesque. So here's your S shape right here. So let's do that. Let's put the S shape right in this picture. Watch. Just watch what I do. So here's my S shape. That's my basic rhythm in this drawing. Okay? So my next step is going to be I'm going to draw this shape here, my oval. I'm going to put a point on it. Wow. Look at that. Then I have this big oval, and I'm going to put a point down here. So you see the arabesque. These are your two dominant shapes. Then on the side, I'm going to put a smaller oval and one pointing up, oval. And I have my little Fifth Symphony. Dun, 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 the big one. Get it? How cool is that? All right, so now I'm going to lighten it up just a touch. I have what's known as a kneaded eraser. These are just for blotting or lightly rubbing the paper. Okay, so I'm just going to take off some of the boldness of the line. Okay, and I'm going to start using my color. So I'm going to get my brush. Your watercolor brushes in the art store are the ones with the short handle, just so you know. Okay, and the idea with watercolor is you work from light to dark. You do all your light colors first. The darks go on last. It's just the opposite in painting. Acrylic or oil painting, you generally put the darks on first and the lights go on last. Okay, so I'm going to start over here with some of my oranges and my yellows together. And I'm just going to put some of them in. Okay, and I'm going to blot them a little so they're not so bold. Okay, just going to get a little hue. Very nice. Just going to get a little hue here. And I'm going to get a little hue in there. Okay. All right, so I used my paper towel to dry it off because I don't want it to be wet. So now I used my light color. And notice I just sketched it in. Now I'm going to go over and use my orange yellow. Okay, and I'm going to come in here. Okay, one. Notice my brush has got a little point on it. It helps. Okay, I just blotted a touch. Already, some people like that look that the paper towel leaves, the texture the paper towel leaves. Okay. I'm going to go in here. And I'm going to go here. Okay. Wow, look at that. That's already looking sweet. And we really want to give it a little more color, but it's already looking sweet. Actually, it's kind of beautiful, just like that, okay? And if you look at a lot of modern art, you go to these galleries and museums, you go, gee, that looks unfinished. And sometimes artists go, that's the way I want it, okay? So I'm going to go a little redder. I'm going to go over here, my color cake, okay? Go a little redder and get some of that, like some of those reds that we see in there. Okay, notice the way I'm letting the water do the work. Okay, I'm not brushing a lot. Okay, I'm going to go back, get a little more orange in here. Let the orange and the red mix together now. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to go back, get some of this. Okay, just not, it's almost like I'm putting puddles down and I'm just letting, I let the water work. Okay, I'm gonna go back up here and back up here. We're gonna be done in about 5 minutes, all right? So now I'm gonna go to my next color cake, which is a little darker. Notice I'm going from light to dark. Okay. And look at what the dark starts to do. Notice I'm doing in this edge of this leaf, this is wet on dry technique. So wherever I tell the color to stop, it stops. Okay, that's key. All right. So I got my purple red. How beautiful. Look at that. Wow. Okay. And this is a warm color. Everything here has been warm. So in my background, if you take a look at the influence, I'm going to be using cool colors, the blues, the light blues, and that warm color will just bounce. Okay? That's how you do it. I'm just gonna blot this a little and give it a little water to play it, meld it. How pretty. Put some more oranges in here. Yes. Oh, how sweet. Look at that color. Really rich orange. Let that water work just like that. I'm just letting the water, it's not going to go outside that line because that paper's dry. So I think you understand that now. Look at those sweet, rich oranges. It's almost like persimmons. How beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to go over here, get a little yellow. The yellow will mix, create a nice little highlight. Okay. How lovely. Okay. And for the vase on the bottom, I had done something, I had worked with a very light gray. I kind of kept it a little neutral. And the silver, I have a silver in here. I'm going to touch the gold and the silver together. That ought to be sweet. Oh, that's nice. Okay, very nice. And in the background, I'm just going to lightly now, I'm going to load my brush with water, just get a very light hue here. I test it first. I think I want to go a little bluer than that. I'll do this blue. Yeah, I'll do this blue. Okay. So my background, the minute I put that blue, and I'm not going to touch the edge because it's wet, and I just did. So sometimes you do. And I'll pick that up with my paper towel in a minute. Okay, but I have my cool colors here. Now, I had mentioned that you could bring a blow dryer to the exercise. And the blow dryer is good because I'm going through this assignment quickly. But with the blow dryer, you could stop, blow dry it for like 3 or 4 minutes. But I'm not going to stand here for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm sure you'll get bored. And blow dry the whole thing. And then go into it with your blue, and your blue won't do this. Okay? But you know, that's kind of pretty in a way. Okay, a little water. And this is your first watercolor. I'm thinking it's your first. I don't know. It might be your 41st. But for those of you who are just being introduced to it, I think it's really interesting. And I think it's simple and beautiful. Okay, get a little black here. And I like to put the table line on an angle. Okay, as opposed to straight across. I just like that. I think it makes it more interesting. So I'm going to blot this up here. Let's see what we get. And this is what happens. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so you have a hue in the background. Okay. That's not bad. Now, this particular piece here that I did, I worked on that. That may have been a half hour or a little more, maybe 40 minutes. I mean, I really kept going back and throwing purples in there, which I'll show you. If I throw a little purple in here with the red, you know, I'll get some of these darker tones in here. But I kept working it, and for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to do a 30-minute movie here. But that's how you do it. Okay, you take your time. You do these repeated applications. You let the water sit. Saturate it with your reds. See what's happening? Look at how beautiful. I mean, I think it's beautiful. Okay. All right, so notice I'm just I hit it and I move away. That's kind of pretty, just like that. And I'll go and get a couple more blues. Go over some of that black. And that's a watercolor. Okay. Now I can hit this. I can go over this with my paper towel and pull some of that color out and get the paper to become much more alive in the piece. But that's it. And you got to go with your feelings with this thing. If the color feels right. Cezanne said something really, really interesting. He said, a work of art which does not begin in emotion is not art. So there has to be some emotional content basis for what you're doing, colors you're using, how you set it up, and at the same time, you're using the Arabesque. So I would just invite you to try this out. I think it's adorable. Put a frame around it, and it's ready for hanging. Okay, so next time, I'd like to experiment and demonstrate for you a technique I use a lot in the art class and in my own work called trace and transfer. I think you should learn how to do that. It disarms and demystifies a lot of how to do art, and it makes you much more comfortable in exploring your ideas. If you feel your drawing skills are not competent enough, trace and transfer is a way of keeping the quality of the drawing very strong and keeping your ideas very bold. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this. See, just you see how the water's moving that? That's kind of beautiful. Okay, so if I was to put a frame around that just before you go, let me see if I have one little frame here. I'm going to jerk around with here. Oh, so what if I was to do this? Put it right in the middle here. Give you guys a shot of this, how it would look. Get that stupid thing out of there. That looks sweet. Actually, it would deserve a better frame. The frame would come right up to the angle like that. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so enjoy, have fun. Wet on wet, wet on dry.